The most widespread and relatable problem in the world is this. So many of us feel cursed with overthinking, a mind that won't shut up, and regular emotional turbulence that seems to rob us of our peace and joy. Eventually, we might have tried everything. Tried talking about it, the medications, the meditations, the deep breathing, and the positive affirmations. And although these things seem to help for a while, they never seem to create a sustainable shift. That's when we might begin to ask the question, how do I actually get to the root of this problem? How do I stop the onslaught of negative thinking, fear, anxiety, and uncomfortable emotions for good? Or at least, how do I stop them from controlling me and my life? On top of that, many of us have deeper existential questions inside us that no philosophy, spirituality, or religion seems to provide satisfying clarity on. What even is this reality? What is the real truth about what's going on? Non duality is a teaching or message that points us directly to the answers, not through complicated philosophy or methods, but through simple, direct pointing and seeing. It points us to the truth that all your fears and worries cannot ultimately harm you and are not ultimately real. It points us to a peace and stability that's always present and unconditionally available. It points us to a space in which all the emotional turbulence and limiting beliefs can be gradually resolved and released. So, in this video, I'm explaining non duality and awakening ultra simply because so many people say to me, Alex, I've been reading books and watching videos on this stuff for years. A lot of teachers say loads of abstract, spiritual, confusing concepts. It's only after I watched your videos it finally clicked. Because it was so much more simple and direct. And I get it. I resonate because I like things to be simple and direct too. And some of the ways that this gets talked about makes it sound so overcomplicated or exotic, only available for those who can understand all the poetic and spiritual jargon, which isn't true. The fruits of non duality and awakening are available to all of us. Whether you're completely new to these terms or a seasoned explorer, this video can be super valuable to you. So let's get into it, starting with the first question. What does non-duality mean? Non-duality literally means not two. You might say, but Alex, what does that actually mean? What exactly is apparently not two? Well, what non-duality is proposing is that this reality, this reality we appear to experience is not two. You might say, but Alex, this is sounding like abstract philosophical complications already. I know, but hear me out. Because it's actually a lot more simple than we think. The most common way of perceiving reality is in opposites, in dualities. We tend to think that there is me and others, that there is me and the world. We tend to believe that I am just a person living in a world and everything and everyone is separate from me. And we can spend most of our time focused on the thoughts in our head, believing all of them to be true and feeling like we have to effort as a person to figure everything out and manipulate the world to our favor. We also tend to believe that lasting peace and happiness is out there in the world, in experiences, substances, or achievements. We might think, if only I could get the financial security, the glowing health, or the perfect relationship, if only I could get these things on the outside, it will change how I feel on the inside. And so we spend our lives chasing these things, sometimes even achieving them, only to find out that after feeling good for a moment or a while, the fundamental unease inevitably creeps back in, and there never seems to be that lasting peace and satisfaction that was promised. This fundamental belief in being separate from the world and others, of always needing to get somewhere or become something to be whole and complete, is the source of our suffering. When non duality says not to, it's proposing that this idea of you being separate from the world is an illusion, and that the true nature of reality is not to, as in, there is no separation. The you who seems to be observing life and the life that's unfolding are actually a single whole, a single reality. There's many different ways of expressing the non-dual message, but the way I like to say it is this: you're not just a person, not just a body and a mind. You're not just the character in your thinking. You are this infinite consciousness, or just consciousness or awareness for short. And your nature is peace, love, and fulfillment. Non-duality is about realizing, or more accurately, remembering this. You might say, but Alex, if I realize this, it doesn't mean all my problems instantly vanish, does it? I still have to live my life, meet my basic needs, pay the bills, and deal with my partner. And there's still good and bad things that happen in the world and all kinds of untold suffering. Isn't this just a nice, fluffy idea to make you feel better? Well, it's true. Realizing this doesn't mean that you instantly feel permanently blissful or that all of your feelings and life challenges instantly disappear. But it does mean you begin to see them in the true context. Imagine you're playing a super realistic computer game. Sometimes the game is jolly and bright. Sometimes it's pretty horrific. Now, imagine that you could forget that you're playing the game. You forget that there's a screen, and you believe that you're actually stuck inside the game. You begin to start getting completely emotionally pulled around by what's happening in the game. And you believe it to be completely real, that you're the character in the game, and that everything that's happening in the game is happening to you. Then you might remember that there's a screen and it's just a game. The game still appears to play out. Whether so-called good or bad things happen, you may still be very engaged with the game and still feel the emotions. But in the back of your mind, you know that ultimately it's just a game and you are safe. Remembering the truth of non-duality is similar in the sense that it doesn't necessarily mean that all of your life challenges or disturbing states instantly vanish. Life will still pose its challenges. But you do remember that you are the consciousness that everything appears in. And ultimately, it can't harm you. It can't harm what you essentially are. Staying with this revelation creates the perfect foundation to release all the stuck fears and emotions and have so many challenging and disturbing life situations resolve all by themselves. You might say, but Alex, isn't this just another belief, another dogma? Isn't saying you are awareness just another belief? Well, it can just become just another belief if you simply try to believe it. But non-duality isn't actually trying to get you to believe anything. I always say to the people I work with, don't believe me. Investigate for yourself if what I'm saying is actually true for you. You see, a belief is a mental position. It's made out of thinking. But just for a moment, as I'm talking, can you simultaneously notice the sensation of yourself sitting on the chair? Or just the pressure sensation of your feet on the ground? Now, to notice that, you couldn't think about it. You had to go to your direct experience of the sensation. Now, assuming you're safe to do so, keep noticing the sensation and also zoom your attention out and notice the periphery of your vision. Notice the whole wide open space that everything's appearing in. Again, to do that, you couldn't think about it. Instead, you had to relax your attention and notice your direct experience. This is what non-duality is pointing to. not just another belief, concept, or idea. It's inviting you to investigate your direct reality and experience. Through this direct seeing of reality, clarity dawns. You're not just the thinking, not just the body and mind, but this whole space of consciousness, full of everything that's appearing. You might say, okay, so what exactly is awakening? What are we waking up from, and what are we waking up to? Well, the way we usually use the term awakening is awakening from sleep or a dream, right? When we're experiencing the dream, we may take it to be the entire reality and that we're stuck inside it. When we wake up from the dream, we see it from a totally different perspective. It's even possible to wake up in the dream, what we call a lucid dream. When we go lucid, we experience the dream still, but we realize it not to be a separate world that we're inside of, but actually an appearance of consciousness. This gives us a profound sense of freedom and maybe even the ability to create all kinds of unusual dream circumstances. Awakening, in the context of non-duality, is similar. What we're awakening from is the dream of being just a person in a world, to the vivid reality that the whole thing is an appearance of consciousness, and that's what we essentially are. Not a dream within our individual minds, but a dream within the one mind, the mind of infinite consciousness. Well, you might say, okay, this all sounds great, Alex, so how do I awaken? Well, the answer might seem a little paradoxical. In one way, we could say you're already awake. It's just that you might claim that you're not. It's a bit like asking in the dream, how do I realize that this is all a dream? Well, ultimately, it already is. You've just got to stop overlooking that fact and believing yourself to be just a dream character. You see, ultimately, nothing that happens in the dream is a condition to remembering that it's a dream at any point, because the dream is simply an appearance within you. You are the ultimate power here, not anything that happens in the dream, right? It could be reading a book, could be a falling leaf that appears to trigger it. But you might say, but Alex, despite everything you say, I don't feel awake. Isn't there some kind of process or thing that I can do to awaken? Well, despite the unconditional nature of awakening, there are still processes and practices on offer. Ultimately, the path can look like a wide variety of things. You might listen to these videos, and at some point, clarity simply dawns. You might go to a retreat, visit a great sage, or work with a guide, and at some point, the penny drops. Common processes include what we call self-inquiry. This is where, through something that looks a bit like meditation, you investigate your reality to find out what's true and who or what you really are. A similar process is called the neti-neti process, which is a Sanskrit term that translates to not this, not this. Basically, it's a process where you're imagining removing everything that you're not: thoughts, feelings, sensations, and perceptions. And through this process of removing everything that you're not, the reality of what you really are, this consciousness, is clearly revealed. Personally, I mostly like to use what we call non-dual pointing or direct non-dual pointing. Basically, using conversation and relatable metaphors to point out this truth of who or what we really are. Ultimately, it's your unique journey and experience, but what we're pointing to is something that's universal to all of us. There is an unconditional peace, love, and fulfillment that's already here. You just have to wake up and see it for yourself. If you feel called to explore awakening, I have a free mini course called Awake and Embodied Essentials, and the link to that is in the video description. Alternatively, if you feel called to explore awakening on a deep, deep level, I invite you to join Awake and Embodied. Over there, we have the full Awakening and Embodiment course, community platform, and weekly live group calls with me, all to serve and support you on your journey. I hope you enjoyed this video. See you in the next one. Peace.